I'm Michael Pauley, and this is Faith in Politics. On this broadcast, we range from the soul to the state as we cultivate those virtues and explore those principles that help us live well as faithful Catholics in this great land. Well, good day, everyone. I'm broadcasting today from Rapid City, South Dakota, and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Motz, who is in the studio at the Diocese of Sioux Falls. Chris, how are you doing today?
Doing really well.
Awesome. Well, I'm in my home studio, which is right next to Ellsworth Air Force Base, and the B-1 bombers routinely fly over our house, and they're doing that today. So if there's any loud noises from supersonic airplanes, that's just what life is like next to an Air Force base. So, but very happy to be back home in Rapid City after a few weeks of travel. I've been on the road for almost 2.5 weeks, started with a conference in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, of all the different state Catholic conference directors, then traveled to Spokane, Washington for a few days, and from there to Napa, California for the Napa Institute conference. And I know we have some listeners in other states, and I don't want to denigrate any place that people call home, but I just have to say that it's a relief to be back home in South Dakota. I think sometimes we don't realize what a special place this is until we travel elsewhere and get to experience traffic jams and bad air quality and all that. But with that shameless plug for our home state, let me just dive into our topic of the day. So we've done a few podcast episodes just focusing on the Dobbs decision and the aftermath as it's playing out in the states. And you know, as we predicted, you know, the battle is now back into the states, and we've experienced some great successes on the life issue and also some setbacks, which, you know, we kind of expected would be the case. But one pattern I think we've seen emerge is that the advocates for, you know, preserving kind of an unlimited license to legal abortion seem to be going back to a very tried and true playbook for them, which is focusing on what we call the hard cases. So, you know, we're hearing a lot about, you know, abortion being needed in cases of rape or in cases of incest, in cases where the health of the mother is endangered, and then also in cases where there's a fetus who has disabilities. And I thought in today's podcast, we would just kind of bring sort of a laser-like focus to that last item on the list of hard cases, which is pregnancies involving babies with disabilities. And one of the most common disabilities that we sometimes see concerns Down syndrome. And it's estimated that between 60 and 90% of pregnancies involving babies with Down syndrome end in abortion, compared to 18% of pregnancies overall. And so clearly, preborn children with Down syndrome are among the most abortion vulnerable groups. We need to protect them to ensure they have a chance to be born. And they need a lot of special care and protection after they are born. And so we have a guest for today's show who brings a lot of expertise to the subject of children who experience Down syndrome and providing for their needs. So I'm happy to welcome to our show Lauren Costabile, who is the founder and executive director of Hearts of Joy International. Lauren, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Great. So we obviously want to hear a lot about this amazing mission of Hearts of Joy International. But before we get there, maybe you could just share with our listeners a little bit about your background, a little bit about your upbringing, your education, maybe some thoughts about your faith life and how that's affected your life journey.
Yeah, so I am from New Jersey, so I'm a Jersey girl. I grew up in a big Italian, Catholic, loud family. Some of you can relate to that. But so much joy and so much love in our family. And, you know, faith for me was always kind of a checklist growing up. And even as I got a little bit older into college, it wasn't until after that, when I was in my mid-20s, that I started to experience God in a different way. And I realized the importance of that relationship. that it's not just following the commandments and following these things that your parents tell you, but you have to choose the faith for yourself. And that it's something that God wants to grow in that relationship with you. And I often say it's like talking to a friend. If you want to get closer to that friend, you need to actually speak with them. So it's the same with God and Jesus, being in communication. And yeah, you do that through prayer and different things in your life. But I started to really grow in that relationship. And he slowly but surely throughout my life was planting the seed of working with children with disabilities, in particular Down syndrome, throughout my life. But it wasn't until I was about like 26 that I said, okay, I get it, God, this is what you want for me. But it was kind of a gradual progression.
Yeah. And you are, if I'm remembering correctly, a graduate of an institution that I greatly admire, Thomas Aquinas College.
Yeah, St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah, wonderful institution. Yeah.
Lauren, I might have to turn my video off here because I cry kind of easily, and I'm already starting to get a little weepy just hearing the beauty of this story. But I, this ministry, Hearts of Joy International, you founded it in 2019. I'm wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about the mission of the organization, but also we're really interested in hearing what inspired it. Like, what was happening in your own heart that gave genesis to this group?
Yes. So Hearts of Joy International provides life-saving heart surgery for individuals with Down syndrome. So 50% of them are born with a congenital heart defect that requires surgery to repair before they're 6 months to a year old. Now, if that is not repaired at that timely manner, it becomes fatal for the child. And so here in America, it's pretty routine that the child will get the surgery. They're totally fine. They can live a happy, long, healthy life as long as they get it corrected in that time frame. The issue in other parts of the world, especially in developing countries, which is primarily where we work, there's a real lack of awareness for people with Down syndrome, and also a lack of resources, and there's a great stigma against them because they have a disability, living in these ancient cultures that don't understand them and don't know how to provide for them, and also just view them as less valuable than the rest of the world. And so they're not included in society. And so my background is in, working with actually adults with disabilities, in particular Down syndrome. For a while, I did recreational therapy. So that's what I studied in college. So that's like music, dance, art therapy. I say all the fun stuff. It used to be the fun stuff for me. Now it's the serious medical stuff, but it's okay. But I used to do all the fun stuff with this population. I absolutely loved it. And I remember always seeing that these adults had these big scars on their chests. And I remember asking as a kid, because I volunteered at a camp for children with disabilities when I was 17. And that was my first experience of individuals with Down syndrome. And they just completely stole my heart with their joy and their just infinite love for others. But I remember I asked the director, like, what is that? And they told me about the heart defect. And I was always intrigued by it, but it just kind of was in my back pocket, never came up. And then in 2017, I went to Uganda for the first time. And I visited the Down syndrome community there. And I was able to see firsthand that these children, there's nothing in place for them. And it just made me so sad, because these are the people I love the most. These are the people I feel that God has called me to serve in this world. And I just couldn't accept that, people didn't understand or accept them, but that they were also not getting this most very basic medical care that we get here in the States, no problem. And so I met a little baby who was 6 months old. That was the perfect age. I just fell in love with her. So sweet. She had the biggest brown eyes, the most beautiful little face, button nose, and she had 3 holes in her heart. And so God literally told me to help her. And that's kind of the inspiration behind the whole thing, is that I helped this one baby receive that surgery. And she was rejected from the hospitals in Uganda solely because she had Down syndrome and a disability. And so she was considered high risk. And so I ended up taking her to a hospital in India. And that's where I learned that that's the most proficient way to get care for people in this part of the world. And so now we work in 5 countries. We work in Uganda, India, Mexico, the Philippines, and then here in the States, we will counsel women that get that prenatal diagnosis and walk with them through the pregnancy. We'll throw baby showers, help connect them with other families of children with Down syndrome. So we do quite a bit, but it's just been, such a beautiful gift for me to experience all these different cultures. And at the end of the day, like, these people are kids. They want to be loved. They want to be accepted, and they're kids, disability or not. We all desire the same things. And so, I'm continuing to learn, but it's just been such a joy.
Wow. Well, thank you. So you've been in existence for less than 4 years. This is an incredibly complicated, I think it's fair to say this is a complicated mission field, to be in, navigating the what's going on in some of these developing countries, identifying the people who have the needs, getting them matched with the right providers. This is very complicated, and you've just done incredible things in just under 4 years. So, but I guess I want to just ask, looking forward into the future, 5 years, 10 years from now, what are your hopes for where you'd like to see Hearts for Joy of International be at that time?
Yeah, thank you. My hope is to, continue to provide this care for as many children as possible, but really that education piece and shouting this above the rooftops that these children have value, and seeing a world where we understand that as a whole globally. It's a big goal, but I really know that anything is possible for God. And through this ripple effect of, Mother Teresa always talks about that, and I love her, of just doing what you feel that God has called you to do and making that little drop in the ocean. That's how I feel I'm making an impact through the staff in these countries that work with us, and through our team, and the mothers that we work with and the families that we work with. It's just, I would love to see that ripple continue until the end of time, where then everyone understands these children and can just openly love them, and there's no more stigma. And but I would love to see a world where these children can live a full and happy life, and they don't have to worry about anything, or not being able to get the care that they so very much deserve.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you.
Lauren, we know there are just so many of these children that need help, yet your resources are limited. And it's, I think, just not possible at this point in time to help every single one of them. And we think of maybe this being a bit overwhelming. And there's this quote from Mother Teresa that comes to mind, because she was faced with a similar sort of situation, and people asked her about this. And here's what she said. She said, "I never look at the masses as my responsibility. I look at the individual. I can only love one person at a time. Just one. So you begin. I began. I picked up one person. Maybe if I didn't pick up that one person, I wouldn't have picked up 42,000. So I guess my question is this the approach that you've chosen to take, to help one person at a time and then challenge others to do the same? How do you look at it?
Yeah, I think that is a beautiful way of viewing it, because you can get so overwhelmed with the need. The need is very great, and the need is everywhere. And people are constantly asking us to help them, even in other countries where we're not. But I personally, and what I try to strive for, both individually and within my team, is exactly what you said: loving that one person and making a deep, impactful difference in their life, because that is what is going to change the world. That's what's going to change people's mind. You work with one family in a rural village in Uganda that thinks that their child is cursed, and we tell them the truth. No, this child is a gift from God. The child's been given to you for a reason, and it's a blessing, and you're going to learn so much from this child, and you're going to grow together and have a beautiful life. They then say, whoa, I've never heard that before. But you're right, because we don't just say things or educate. We walk with the people. We walk the talk, and or whatever that saying is, we do what we say. And I think that's also something that sets us apart from other organizations, is we are heavily interested in the relationship with our families, because that's where you make the greatest impact. And I always talk about depth. I mean, we could be in every country in the world, and that would be amazing. I hope one day we have the finances and the resources to help every single country in the world. But right now we're in 5 of them. What are we doing in those 5? We're taking it one day at a time, one child at a time, one family at a time, and making a deep, impactful difference in their lives that will radiate, the rest of their lives here on earth, that they continue to share that with everyone around them.
Yeah. So Lauren, I don't think anyone would question that the greatest need for the mission you're doing exists in the developing countries, where so many of the people are underserved by the healthcare system, where health insurance is not commonplace. But I'm just curious, in the course of your work, have you become aware, and I don't know what the case is are there a significant number of people in the United States and other developed countries who, because of not being insured, are not able to get these surgeries that are needed? What's the state of affairs on that?
So here in America, even if you're on Medicaid or Medicare, most people will be able to get that procedure covered. So
Okay.
we will help more with the emotional piece of it here, or helping to connect them with a hospital that will help provide this service, or the logistical arm of it. Whereas in the developing countries, they absolutely will not provide the service unless you have the money up front. And for our families, that's completely out of reach. And just to give you an example of, like, specifically in Uganda, one US dollar is something like 3,500 shillings. And
That's
just to get,
amazing.
just to get a medical exam of like a heart scan is something like 15 US dollars, but it's about 50,000 shillings. And for our families, that's a lot. So
Yeah.
you can't imagine what it would be for a whole heart surgery. It's too much for our families. But a beautiful part of our program that I really pride myself on is that we do encourage them to pay for something, because we're not interested in just giving free handouts. We don't want to make it difficult for people, but this is a whole nother conversation about poverty, but we're looking to empower them and dignify them as parents and caretakers, that this is their child, and that they have to have a piece in that. They have to be a part of providing for their care. And they do, without a doubt. These families amaze me every time. People will sell their goats, they'll sell their chickens, and they do it to pay for a passport or to pay for a portion of our program. And it just continues to amaze me every time, because then that shows me our program's working. Because if they didn't care about the child, they wouldn't put in the effort. But we help them to see, like, the gift that the child is. And so then they put the work in, and they go above and beyond. And it's just amazing to see the difference in the families. I mean, of course, in the child, the surgery literally saves their life. And it's incredible to see that difference of when they're incredibly sick, almost dying, to completely fine. It's miraculous, honestly.
Yeah.
But for me, it's also such a joy to see the shift in the parents' hearts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm thinking back to that quote, Chris, that you just read from Mother Teresa, about how she started by picking up one person. And I'm just going to guess that there's probably some people in our listening audience today who are thinking, well, I want to be the one who picks up one person and helps one person in front of me. So for people who are interested in supporting your mission, where can they go? How can they help?
Yes, you can visit our website, which is www.heartsofjoyinternational.com. You could donate there. There are other ways to get involved, different fundraisers, or we have an Amazon wish list of all therapy supplies and things for the children that we use in the hospitals for care packages for them. And there are a number of ways that you can get involved or get in touch with us there. And then also on social media, we're on Instagram and Facebook, just at Hearts of Joy International. So we'd love for you to join along on our journey and stay in touch with us.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Lauren, I'm just really struck by the beauty of this, that it's really an education. I mean, you're doing very practical, concrete things in making lives better, but there's also an education in love, that all human beings are made by love, for love, that's the source of our dignity, is that we're made in the image of God. And I'm just struck that this is in complete contrast to this ethic that we receive from the world sometimes, that it's a utilitarian ethic, that actually our value as human beings comes from what we can do, what we can create, sort of our economic potential, if you will. And people with disabilities just sort of shatter this ethic because it's their lives don't make sense according to this ethic, that they can't, there's not a utilitarian value there. And of course, it's such a profoundly unchristian ethic that it goes right in the face of this belief that we have that no, value is inherent in human life, all human life, because we're made in God's image. So my question is, has your work given you, just in these last few years, any new insights about how to combat this utilitarian ethic of the human person, and any ideas about how we can move hearts, even those of our fellow citizens who might not be Christians, how we might be able to move hearts to see that all people, including people with disabilities, are precious in the eyes of God?
Yeah, I often speak about this because you're absolutely right. You touched on a very important point, because we're not what we do. God didn't create us to get something from us, or we exist and we have value solely because God created us, and that goes for everyone. I think personally, through this work and through the opportunities that I've had, it's experience, it's relationship, it's encounter with people that are differently abled. Because I guess I didn't have any real experience or any encounters before I was 17 years old. So now looking back, I'm like, I can't even imagine that world when I didn't know people with Down syndrome or have this experience. But I think that mindset is ingrained in the thought of, what can I gain from you, or what can I get from you, almost use. And we know that that's definitely not the Christian perspective. But even just from a human level, it's not what can I gain from you, or what are you going to do for me, or what are you going to do for the world, or how successful, or how much money, or no, solely because you are a human person created by God the Father, you have value. And I think just by encountering people or sharing our lives, like me sharing about this mission that I do, hopefully someone listening would be like, wow, I never thought of it that way. Or I've maybe they've never experienced someone with Down syndrome, but I think we can hear all these things about people with disabilities. Oh, they're not going to do this, they're not going to do that, they're not going to contribute. But it's like, what are they going to do? They're going to do something, and their life has purpose, even if they're just laying in a wheelchair their entire life and they're nonverbal and they can't speak or communicate. God still created that human being for a purpose. And I think as a society, we need to know that, and not to find people by the things that they can't do, but what can they do? Even if it's just smile, they can do that. And we need to see that as purposeful. I could go on and on about this forever, but for the sake of time, I will stop.
Oh, thank you, Lauren. That was beautiful. And as I listened to you talk about the dignity of these children who have disabilities, I can't help but hear echoes of Dr. Jerome Lejeune, who I know is a name very familiar to you and probably to many of our listeners. But for those in our audience who are not familiar, Dr. Jerome Lejeune was a French geneticist who discovered that Down syndrome is the result of the third replication of the 21st chromosome in the human genome. And that's one of the reasons why another name for Down syndrome is trisomy 21. But Dr. Lejeune was he was a very faithful Catholic, and also a passionate defender of those with Down syndrome, both before and after birth. And I'm just wondering, to what extent Dr. Lejeune's legacy might have been an inspiration for your own work in this field, Lauren.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's on his way to canonization, I think. So I'm like, yes, hopefully we'll finally have a patron saint of Down syndrome. Always prayed to him for his intercession anyway, until he becomes that. But Absolutely. I've read his books, and I've actually been blessed to connect with his family because he has a foundation, the Jerome Lejeune Foundation, that helps continue the legacy of his work. And yeah, I think I mean, the fact that he discovered this, we often joke in the community that they should change the name to the Lejeune syndrome rather than Down, because most people don't know that they associate Down with something bad, but it's actually just the person's name. It was another scientist that I think they discovered around the same time, or different ways that they discovered it, but his name was Langdon Down, Dr. Langdon Down. So that's why it's called Down syndrome. But I'm like, oh, we should just petition to change it to Lejeune syndrome because, well, he was Catholic, and also I just think he's better. But yeah, no, I think the way that he fought for these children and advocated for them to help better their lives, but also was incredibly pro-life and Catholic, is really inspiring to me. And I hope one day to be able to go to his canonization in Rome that day. And yeah, and the legacy that he's left with his foundation, I mean, they're doing incredible things. And yeah, they're just wonderful. Yeah, he's very inspiring for many reasons, but I think the way that he dignified these people, these individuals, I think is just something that I try to, learn from and aspire to be as well.
Yeah, and I think he is now, his title is Venerable. Is that
okay? Correct? Yeah, Venerable, I don't actually
Jerome
know.
Lejeune. Yeah, so
he's on his way.
Yeah, he's on his way, and some miracles will have to be attributed to his intercession. So, that's something that listeners can keep in mind to pray for the Venerable Jerome Lejeune's intercession on special needs, and you can help participate in advancing the canonization of Dr. Lejeune.
Lauren, I know that when you speak with parents of children with Down syndrome, they always tell you about the unique gifts that their children bring to the world. Can you share with our listeners what some of these gifts are? Because I know that they're really special.
Yeah, I think any parent you talk to, you might get mixed review on how they got that diagnosis or the experience that they went through to almost grieve what they thought this child was going to be, or what they thought this child was supposed to be, and then the reality of the child that God gave them. I mean, any parent will tell you it's the greatest blessing in their life, and not only as a parent, but to the siblings, to other people in the family. I think these children just love in such an unconditional way, and I know that sounds cliche, but they're so close to Jesus in the sense where they don't care what we're wearing. They don't care what we do for a living. They don't care what our hair looks like. Like, they just love you. They have this like superhuman way of like just looking into your heart and seeing you for who you truly are, who God created you to be. That's just something that I've taken away from working with them, is like, wow, I really strive to be like that, because we have the choice to like hate people or to judge people or to say, you know what, I don't like this person's behavior. And I'm not saying that individuals with Down syndrome are perfect by any means. They're human, they have their things as well, but there is something inherent that I like in their hearts, the way that God created them, that we don't have, that we can learn so much from. And then the joy that they bring. I mean, it's why I call it hearts of joy, because I was thinking of what is the word that totally encompasses the lives of those with Down syndrome. And in prayer, God kept telling me it's joy. Like, you need to show the joy of these children rather than, what everyone thinks are fears, or, when you get that diagnosis and there's so many unknowns and doctors are saying, I'm sorry, rather than congratulations. So, I really feel that it's my duty to show the joy and the gift and the love that these children are. And I've experienced that countless times over in any country in the world. It's not just here, it's across the board. Like, these children are just a true gift. And my prayer is that everyone in this world can come to see that.
Wonderful. Lauren, before our broadcast today, we had a discussion about how sometimes we can even unintentionally create a stigma surrounding people with who have Down syndrome or other disabilities just by the words that we use to talk about them. And I'm just wondering if you can share briefly some examples of kind of the right way and the wrong way to talk about our neighbors who have disabilities.
Yeah, I think language around these issues is very important. And so within the Down syndrome community or even the disabilities community, we use something called first person language. So rather than saying a Down syndrome infant or a Down syndrome teenager, you would say an infant with Down syndrome. We identify them as their personhood first, as a human being first, who has dignity and value, and then comes the condition. So that's something that I just love to educate people on, because it's not for lack of respect or anything malicious. It's just a lack of awareness for knowing that that is the way that we should be addressing people. And that goes with anything, not just Down syndrome or disabilities. Just when you're describing a person or something about the person, you want to identify them as the person first, because we know that Down syndrome or anything in this world, that doesn't define us. We're defined by the fact, like I said, that we're created by God and that we're a human person first. And so that is just something that, I would love to see everyone using first person language as well when talking about this. So
wonderful.
We can always grow and learn. And that's the beautiful thing about this life, is that we're constantly on a journey. So
wonderful. Well, Lauren, we're almost at the end of our discussion time here, but I've just really enjoyed this conversation with you. And just one more time, for any of our listeners who are interested in this mission and want to support your work, what is the web address that they need to go to?
Thank you. It's www.heartsofjoyinternational.com.
Awesome.
So you
wonderful.
can find us there. Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me.
We're grateful for your time, and just want to thank you, and also Chris there in Sioux Falls, and Casey Bassett, our production expert there, who keeps us all organized. It's been a real great discussion today, and until we meet again, live well.